Are you ready to unlock your dream job in the world of data analytics and boost your earnings potential? Well, you have come to the right place. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the top 10 Power BI interview questions so that you can transform your career. But there is a twist, a literal twist. I got here a spin wheel app and I'm going to spin this and take up these questions in the random order. You don't want to miss the ending for an ultimate surprise. So let's go for a spin. Okay, so the first one is going to be number 2. Can you explain the difference between a measure and a calculated column? Now, a measure is something that we can use to calculate things on top of a table. So, for example, if I have got some shipment data in a table and I just want to count how many shipments are there, we can use a measure like count rows on top of the shipments table to count the number of shipments. Whereas a calculated column is something that is part of the table. So in the shipments table, we can use a calculated column to calculate the discount rate based on the order quantity of that shipment. One simple way to think about these is if you think your data table as this hand, then a measure is something that is outside this hand, so it acts on top of the hand, but it's not part of the hand. Whereas a calculated column is like one of the fingers in your hand, it is part of the hand itself. So that is the main difference between these two things. This is a lot harder than I imagined. So the next one is question number 7. Describe the process of publishing a Power BI report to the Power BI service. So the process begins like this. Once you finished creating the report and testing it and sure that you're happy with the results, then you save the file and you hit the publish button in the Power BI desktop. This is going to take your report as well as the data set and then publish it to online platform in a workspace that you select. From that point onwards, your report is available for anybody who has access to that workspace. So this is why it is important to properly test your reports before you publish them, because once it is out, anyone in your organization who can get to that workspace can see what you have created. So you don't want to have any mistakes. The process also involves selecting the workspace and making sure that the right people have access to that workspace. That sort of a thing can be set up in the Power BI service itself by either you or your IT administrator. The next one is number 10. How would you handle missing data in Power BI? So when you get questions like this, it's a good idea to not just give textbook style answers. It is also important and probably more valuable if you give answers from your own previous experiences, either in work or life. So I'm going to give you an example from when I had to deal with missing data. Recently in a Power BI project, we were looking at data that is collected from external parties. Now we sent out a survey asking external parties to fill out the survey and then we are analyzing it. Naturally, as we don't have control over this data, there were many missing values. And the strategy that we used is multifold. For certain missing values, as they are not too important for our analysis, we choose to ignore them. So we didn't bother analyzing or considering those averages or values when calculating summaries. For other kinds of missing data, we choose to again go back to the source and ask them again if they can provide these missing values. So that is another strategy that I would use. The third option is something that I also used because certain missing values we couldn't go back and ask them. So this is where I used a technique called imputation. So let's say we have got some values and there is one missing value in the middle somewhere. We can impute that missing value by, for example, calculating the average of the overall column excluding those missing values, and then using that average as the missing value. We could also use median, mode, or any other statistical metric there. Power Query, which is the main place where your data comes into Power BI, offers many ways to handle these missing values. It also helpfully identifies if there is a missing value in your data. And the next one is question number 5. What is DAX, and can you give me an example of a recent DAX formula you have used? DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions. It is the main calculation language of Power BI. Using DAX, we can calculate measures, we can calculate columns, we can even calculate tables as part of the Power BI. A recent example that I used is similar to what I mentioned earlier, the shipment count measure. So we have got a shipments table and I wanted to know how many shipments are done. So I used a count rows measure on the shipments table to count how many shipments are there. And then I took this measure and sliced it by geography so that I can see how many shipments are going to India or New Zealand or Australia, some of the geographies in which my previous company operated. A more advanced version of the same shipment count measure is low box shipment count. This is where sometimes we send shipments with very few boxes of chocolate in them. Did I mention I used to work in a chocolate company? So I wanted to count how many times we are shipping where the box count is less than 50. So I used a DAX formula on shipment count along with calculate formula to introduce an extra filter to calculate how many low box shipments are there. And then I again was able to visualize this by product or by salesperson to understand who is sending more low box shipments. While I'm going to keep my finger busy by tapping this pin button, I want you to keep your finger busy by tapping that like button if you're enjoying this video. So go ahead and do that. The next one is number 3. Describe the steps you would take to connect multiple sources to a Power BI report. When you open Power BI and when you're trying to connect, initially you can bring in one data source. This could be a SQL Server table or an Excel file or a web page. But once you already have that data in Power BI through Power Query, you can add any number of connections. So we simply use Power Query and then make a new connection. Once all the data is there from different systems, I can then use Power Query to either merge the tables or append them or combine the tables to create a third composite table and load that into Power BI. The next one is number 1. What are the main differences between Power BI Desktop and Power BI Service? Power BI Desktop is the main software or tool that I use as a data analyst to create the reports or calculate things or establish connections and clean my data. Once I finish my job, I then use Power BI Service to publish and share the reports with other people in my organization or outside the organization. So the key difference between these two things is one is a creation tool. The desktop application is the creation tool and the service is the publishing tool, so consumption tool. Anybody who is usually on the service, their main intention is going to be consume the data or reports that you have published, understand what is going on, and then take actions. All right, we are at the last 4 now. Let's see what this one brings up. Number 6, how do you optimize the performance in Power BI reports? Again, I want to remind you that when you get questions like this, instead of giving theoretical or researched answers, give it from your experience, like what you did when you saw that a report was slow. So for example, a recent report that I built for a client was all right initially, but it was kind of getting slow over a period of time. So here is what we did. I first looked at the data that is being used in the report, and I realized that even though we are only analyzing 2023 performance, for some reason we are bringing data from 2021 and 2022 as well. Initially, when the report was created, there was a need to have those, but the client is no longer looking at those parts, or they are no longer interested in those trends. So a simple thing that I did is to remove all the 2021 and 2022 data by updating the query part. You could do this in either Power Query, or in our case, we actually modified the where condition in the SQL so that the data never came into Power Query itself. This drastically reduced the amount of data points that are coming into Power BI and improved the performance. But let's just say that could not fix the problem. You still had to see all of this data. Then the next things that I would do is I would look at the page where the data is being presented, and then I will ask questions about, are there any unnecessary visuals or graphical elements that are not contributing to the overall analysis. If so, I would take them out, because every little thing on the page is going to add a little bit of load time to the report. Even if that could not solve the problem, then I will use a performance profiler. Our BI has a built-in profiler option so that I can run it and then measure for each of the elements on the page how much time they are taking, both for query as well as rendering. And then I will try to attack the items that have very high render values. A simple technique, although I've never used it previously, is rather than loading the raw data, you could also consider building some aggregate tables. Power BI offers native way to do this. I never did that, as there was no requirement for that, but that option is also available. Okay, only 3 more. Number 8. Now, for this one, I'm not going to answer the question simply because I do know the answer. It's just that I thought it would be fun if you also get a chance to answer this question. So I'll read out the question. I'll give you a short answer, but I want you to answer this in the comments below. Explain the row level security in Power BI. How would you implement it? So row level security is a feature of Power BI that we can use to restrict people from seeing parts of the data that they shouldn't be seeing. So for example, if you are a manager, you can see everything, but if you are a line employee, you should only be seeing information that pertains to you. So you can use row level security to do that. Now, how would you answer this? Again, use your life experiences, either from work or personal projects that you have done, and tell me in the comments how you would answer this interview question. Okay, only 2 more. Number 4. And that makes number 6 as the last one, or I think number 9 as the last one. Yeah. What does the 1 star and the arrow mean in the data model diagram? So within Power BI, when you have multiple tables, you can create a data model. In the data model, we'll have these extra symbols between the tables on the line that connects them. So a 1 in star means the relationship is 1 to many. A simple example is going back to the shipments table that I was talking about. In each shipment, we will have a product code and a corresponding product dimension table that tells us more about these products. So the relationship between shipments and products table is many to 1. That means many shipments can be for the same product. So the many side is usually denoted with star and one side is denoted with 1. And then there is also an arrow usually pointing from product table to the shipments table. What this arrow means is the filters will flow from product table down to the shipments table. So that arrow indicates the propagation of filters. A simple way to think about this is, in a report, if I have got a slicer on a product category and I select a specific category like bars in the product category slicer, then because that slicer is in the products table, my product table is going to be filtered first. And as the arrow says, the filter should now propagate down to shipments. It's going to come down to shipments table, shrink the shipment table to just the selected categories records, and then all the values on the screen will be calculated for that. So that's what these symbols mean. And now the last question is number 9, which is, what is a slowly changing dimension, SCD? Give me an example and how you handle it. So again, I'm going to partly answer this, but I want you to think about it and use the comments to write your experience with SCD. A slowly changing dimension is any dimension that slowly changes over time. So a simple example is going back to the previous one, my product table. Within the product table, we have a option called cocoa percentage. So we sell chocolate, so every product has a certain percent of cocoa in it. And that percent is usually fixed for many of our products, but some of the more experimental products, we might tweak this over a period of time. So initially a product might have 20% cocoa, but based on the customer feedback, we might choose to reduce it down to 18% or increase it to 30%. So that column itself is, it's not changing every day, but it changes maybe once every 6 months or once a year, depending on seasonal patterns and whatnot. Now, when that happens, that is a slowly changing dimension because that aspect of that dimension is changing slowly. And you can handle this by keeping track of the percentages in another separate table or having separate rows every time such change happened with an effective date. Let's say you wanted to understand what impact that cocoa percentage had on customer satisfaction or shipment count or something else. You need to know what was the percentage before and after that slow change happened. So we need to have those records. In some other cases, if it is a trivial thing, we wouldn't bother keeping all the values. We just update, delete the old value and put the new value. So that is an example of a slow changing dimension. How do you answer this? Again, put your choices or options in the comments. Now let's talk about the surprise. If you are thinking all of these questions are fine, but I don't understand Power BI that well enough, I don't have that technical understanding or the confidence, then I have got good news for you. I'm running my annual Power BI weekend this year on November 18th and 19th. In this Power BI weekend, it's a 4-hour event, so 2 hours on Saturday, 2 hours on Sunday. We are going to meet in an online meeting, and I will be teaching how to use Power BI so that you can gain that initial confidence and comfort level around this software. It's happening on November 18th and 19th in 2023. But if you're watching this after that date, you can still find the next iteration of this event details in the video description below. So the tickets for this are on sale. Go ahead and sign up now. If you sign up now, you will get a Power BI cheat sheet as an extra bonus as well. So go ahead and check that out. Power BI weekend happening on November 18 and 19. Now, whether you choose to attend this Power BI weekend or not, I sincerely wish you all the very best with your upcoming Power BI interview. I hope you will get that job. Thank you so much for watching, and check out some of my other videos that show up on the screen or sign up for the Power BI weekend. Bye-bye.